March 19, 1990. Seattle, Washington. In a hospital room at Harborview Medical Center, a group of musicians, friends, and family members gather around a young man on life support. For 3 days, Andrew Wood has been in a coma following a heroin overdose. His brain has been deprived of oxygen for too long. There's no coming back. As Queen's A Night at the Opera plays softly in the background, Wood's favorite album, his family makes the heartbreaking decision to let him go. Andrew Patrick Wood, the charismatic 24-year-old frontman of Mother Love Bone, is gone. In the room are two of Wood's bandmates, bassist Jeff Ament and guitarist Stone Gossard. They had spent years building Mother Love Bone into Seattle's next big thing. A major label deal with Polygram. An album called Apple ready for release. Tours planned. The rock stardom Wood had dreamed about since childhood was finally within reach. Now, just days before Apple was scheduled to drop, it was all over. Ament would later recall, "I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I felt like I'd spent a lot of time getting to that point, and the rug got pulled out from underneath us." But from that devastating loss would emerge something neither man could have predicted. Within 18 months, they would form a new band, find an unknown singer from San Diego, and release one of the most influential debut albums in rock history. This is the story of 10, an album born from tragedy, recorded on a shoestring budget, rejected by its own record label, and nearly denied a vinyl release. An album that took a year to break into the mainstream, but eventually sold over 13 million copies in the United States alone. An album that won 4 MTV Video Music Awards, battled Ticketmaster over fan ticket prices, and helped launch the grunge movement into the stratosphere. An album whose most famous song was based on a real teenager's suicide in front of his classmates. Welcome to the Sound Vault. Every album has a story. This is the story of Pearl Jam's 10. To understand 10, you have to understand Seattle in 1990. The city's music scene had been brewing for nearly a decade. Bands like Green River, Soundgarden, and Mudhoney had created a sound that blended punk's raw aggression with metal's power and classic rock's melody. The local indie label Sub Pop was documenting it all, and major labels were starting to pay attention. Soundgarden's Ultra Mega OK had received a Grammy nomination. Nirvana's Bleach had caused enough buzz that Geffen Records swooped in and signed them away from Sub Pop. Something was happening in Seattle, and the music industry wanted in. Among the bands positioned for breakthrough success was Mother Love Bone. Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament had played together in Green River, a pioneering grunge band that split up in 1987 due to creative differences. By 1988, they had teamed up with Andrew Wood, a flamboyant singer who performed under the stage name Landrew the Lovechild in his previous band, Malfunction. Wood was unlike anyone else in Seattle's grungy flannel-wearing scene. He wore makeup, glitter, and platform boots. He quoted Freddie Mercury and spoke about playing Madison Square Garden before Mother Love Bone had even played their first show. His energy was infectious, his ambition boundless. Mother Love Bone quickly attracted major label attention. After what Wood jokingly called the restaurateur of Seattle, where various A&R executives from Los Angeles wined and dined the band, they signed with Polygram. They released a 6-song EP called Shine in 1989, and the buzz grew louder. Their sound combined the grit of Seattle with glam rock theatricality. Songs like Stardog Champion and Crown of Thorns showcased Wood's ability to write both anthemic rockers and introspective ballads. By late 1989, they were recording their debut full-length album, Apple, with high expectations from the label and the Seattle scene alike. But Wood was fighting a battle behind the scenes. He had struggled with heroin addiction for years. His girlfriend, Zana Lafuente, tried desperately to get his family and bandmates to intervene, but everyone was focused on the album and the impending success. "His family wouldn't listen to me," Lafuente later recalled. "All they wanted to talk about was the record deal. I tried to tell them Andy was relapsing, but nobody wanted to fucking confront him." Before Apple's release, Wood checked himself into rehab, determined to get clean for the touring cycle ahead. He completed treatment and stayed sober for over 100 days. On March 9, 1990, Mother Love Bone played a celebratory show at Seattle's Central Tavern, previewing the album. Wood was in great spirits, talking openly about his sobriety. 1 week later, everything fell apart. On Friday, March 16, 1990, Wood made a fatal decision. He drove alone into downtown Seattle and scored heroin. His girlfriend found him unconscious that evening, one fresh track mark on his forearm. The problem was tragically simple. After months of sobriety, his tolerance had dropped. He used nearly the same amount he would have used at the height of his addiction. His body couldn't handle it. For 3 days, Wood remained in a vegetative state at Harborview Medical Center, while his family, friends, and bandmates held vigil. Soundgarden's Chris Cornell, Wood's roommate and close friend, was touring in Europe and rushed home to say goodbye. On March 19, 1990, at 3:15 p.m., Andrew Wood was pronounced dead. He was 24 years old. The Seattle music scene went into shock. Chris Cornell would later call it the death of the innocence of the scene. For Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament, the loss was devastating. Mother Love Bone died with Andrew Wood. In the months following Wood's death, Stone Gossard dealt with his grief the only way he knew how. He wrote music. He spent that summer of 1990 alone, working through his emotions by creating instrumentals on guitar. Meanwhile, Jeff Ament played with various bands around Seattle, trying to figure out what came next. One night in June, they went to see a local band called Love Chili perform. The guitarist, Mike McCready, caught their attention. McCready had been playing in Shadow, a local metal band, but his bluesy, explosive lead guitar style was exactly what Gossard and Ament were looking for. Gossard called McCready and asked if he wanted to jam. Soon, the three were meeting in Gossard's parents' attic in West Seattle, working through the instrumental pieces Gossard had written. They needed a drummer and a singer. They recorded a 5-song instrumental demo with Soundgarden's Matt Cameron sitting in on drums. The instrumental tracks included what would eventually become Alive, Once, Footsteps, Black, and Even Flow. They decided to call the project Mookie Blaylock, after the New Jersey Nets point guard whose aggressive playing style they admired. To find a drummer and vocalist, they gave the demo tape to Jack Irons, the original drummer for Red Hot Chili Peppers. They hoped Irons might join the band himself. He declined. He was working on other projects, but he told them he knew a singer in San Diego who might be interested. The singer's name was Eddie Vedder. Edward Louis Severson III was born on December 23, 1964, in Evanston, Illinois. He grew up believing his mother's husband was his biological father, only to discover as a teenager that his real father was a family friend who had already died. This revelation, learning he had been lied to about his paternity and that his biological father was gone before he could meet him, would become the emotional foundation for one of Pearl Jam's biggest songs. By 1990, Vedder was living in San Diego, working as a security guard at night and a gas station attendant during the day. He was playing in a local band called Bad Radio, but it wasn't going anywhere. Mostly he surfed and wrote lyrics in notebooks. In September 1990, Jack Irons gave Vedder a copy of the Stone Gossard demo tape. Vedder listened to the instrumentals and was immediately inspired. But he didn't just write one set of lyrics, he created an entire narrative arc across 3 songs, what he called a mini-opera titled Mama Son. The story was autobiographical and dark. A young man discovers his real father is dead and that he's been lied to about his paternity. The trauma drives him to become a serial killer. Eventually, he's caught, imprisoned, and sentenced to death. Vedder went surfing the morning after receiving the tape. In a 2024 interview with CBS Sunday Morning, he recalled, "I went for a surf in the morning and I remember it being super foggy, but I had the music in my head, the instrumental, and just kind of wrote it. When he returned home, he was still dripping wet from the ocean. He didn't even dry off. He hit record on his cassette tape player and sang his newly written lyrics over the instrumentals." The 3 songs of his Mama Son trilogy were Dollar Short, later retitled Alive, Agiti and Crave, later Once, and Footsteps. Alive was about learning the truth about his father. Once depicted the protagonist's descent into murder. Footsteps chronicled his final moments on death row. Vedder also wrote lyrics to another instrumental, E-Ballad, which became Black, one of the most emotionally powerful songs Pearl Jam would ever record. He mailed the tape back to Seattle. When Jeff Ament received it and listened, he was stunned. He left, got a cup of coffee, came back, and listened again. Then he called Stone Gossard. "You need to come over here right now," Ament told him. They knew immediately they had found their singer. Within days, they flew Vedder to Seattle for an audition. He arrived on October 13, 1990. Vedder would later describe that first rehearsal. "It was just, I was like, you felt it, like you were like, oh, this is what it is, like this is heaven." Within a week, Vedder had joined the band. Drummer Dave Cruzen, who had also auditioned, completed the lineup. The newly formed group signed to Epic Records and prepared to record their debut album. But Epic had legal concerns about the name Mookie Blaylock. The band changed their name, but kept a connection to their namesake. They titled their album after Blaylock's jersey number. 10. In January 1991, the band, still officially called Mookie Blaylock, entered London Bridge Studios in Seattle for a demo session with producer Rick Parashar. Parashar and his brother Raj had founded London Bridge Studios in 1985, and it had become the epicenter of the Seattle sound. Parashar had recently worked on Temple of the Dog, a tribute project Chris Cornell organized to honor Andrew Wood, which also featured Stone Gossard, Jeff Ament, and Matt Cameron. Eddie Vedder even contributed backing vocals to several tracks, including the powerful duet with Cornell on Hunger Strike. The January demo session produced one song that was so powerful, the band couldn't top it, Alive. When they returned to London Bridge in March 1991 for the full album sessions, they tried multiple times to recreate the energy and emotion of the Alive demo. They couldn't do it. The original recording had captured something magical, raw, immediate, urgent. Drummer Dave Cruzen remembered, "We'd captured that song at that moment. And it was really good." They decided to use the original demo recording for the album, though Mike McCready added a new guitar solo during the final mix that would become one of rock's most iconic outros. The month-long sessions in March and April 1991 moved quickly. Most of the material was already written. Only 4 songs, Porch, Deep, Why Go, and Garden, were actually written during the album sessions. McCready would later admit, 10 was mostly Stone and Jeff. Me and Eddie were along for the ride at that time. But Vedder's contribution was massive. His lyrics transformed Gossard and Ament's instrumentals into deeply personal, emotionally devastating songs about depression, homelessness, mental institutions, and familial pain. Even Flow was about homelessness, inspired by Vedder's observations of people living on Seattle's streets. Why Go chronicled a woman institutionalized against her will. Oceans was a meditation on mortality and the vastness of existence. And then there was Jeremy. In early 1991, Eddie Vedder read a brief newspaper article in the Dallas Morning News. The headline was grim. A 15-year-old high school student named Jeremy Wade Dell had killed himself in front of his English class. On January 8, 1991, at Richardson High School in Texas, Dell arrived late to his second period English class. His teacher told him to go to the office and get an attendance slip. Instead, Dell returned to the classroom with a .357 Magnum revolver. He approached the front of the class and said, "Miss, I got what I really went for." Then he put the gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger in front of his teacher and 30 classmates. Della had been known as a quiet, sad kid. One classmate, Lisa Moore, later recalled that she and Jeremy would pass notes in-school suspension. He would talk about life and stuff. He signed all of his notes, right back, but on Monday he wrote, "Later days." I didn't know what to make of it. The story haunted Vedder. But he also drew from his own junior high school memories in San Diego, where he knew a student who had brought a gun to school and fired it in a classroom, though that student hadn't taken his own life. Vedder explained, "So it's a bit about this kid named Jeremy, and it's also a bit about a kid named Brian that I knew. The song, I think it says a lot. I think it goes somewhere, and a lot of people interpret it different ways." Jeff Ament wrote the music for Jeremy, but getting the song right in the studio proved incredibly difficult. The band struggled with the arrangement, trying to make the chorus sit back while the outro exploded with emotion. Ament recalled, "We knew it was a good song, but it was tough getting it to feel right, for the chorus to sit back and the outro to push over the top. The tune went from practically not making it on the record to being one of the best takes." Producer Rick Parashar contributed piano and organ parts that gave the song its haunting atmosphere. The final version captured both restraint and explosive power, a delicate balance that made Jeremy one of the album's most compelling tracks. After the month-long recording sessions wrapped, the band flew to Ridge Farm Studios in Surrey, England, where mixer Tim Palmer added his touch to the tracks. The remote location led to some creative solutions. When Palmer wanted percussion overdubs for Oceans, he used a pepper mill and a fire extinguisher because they were too far from any music rental shop. The album was complete, but the music industry wasn't sure what to make of it. Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament had learned expensive lessons from Mother Love Bone. That album had cost a significant amount to make, and it was never properly released after Wood's death. For 10, they spent about $25,000 on recording and roughly 3 times that on mixing, still a fraction of what most major label albums cost. Jeff Ament, who had studied art, designed the album cover. The concept was simple but powerful. The 5 band members standing together, arms raised, holding each other's hands. They stood in front of a wood cutout of the words Pearl Jam that Ament had constructed himself. The original concept was about really being together as a group and entering into the world of music as a true band, Ament explained. A sort of all-for-one deal. The cover was supposed to be burgundy. Epic Records released it in pink instead, a decision that frustrated the band but ultimately made the album instantly recognizable. There was another frustration. Epic refused to release 10 on vinyl in the United States. By 1991, major labels were phasing out vinyl production in favor of the more profitable compact disc format. Since nobody at Epic expected 10 to go gold, they saw no reason to press vinyl. They didn't let us put it out on vinyl, Jeff Ament later told the Daily Record. And that was a rough blow to us at the time because I don't think I even had a CD player. Though the original US vinyl pressings show a 1991 copyright date, 10 didn't actually receive a domestic vinyl release until November 22, 1994, the same day Pearl Jam's third album, Vitalogy, made its vinyl debut. Just before the album's release, there was one more personnel change. Dave Krusen, who had drummed on the entire album, checked himself into rehabilitation for alcoholism in May 1991. He had to leave the band. Krusen would later reflect, "It was a great experience. I felt from the beginning of that band that it was something special. They had to let me go. I couldn't stop drinking and it was causing problems. They gave me many chances but I couldn't get it together." Matt Chamberlain briefly filled in but had other commitments. He recommended Dave Abruzzese, who became the band's drummer for the 10 touring cycle. On August 27, 1991, Epic Records released 10. The music industry barely noticed. Initial sales for 10 were modest at best. The album sold slowly in its first few months, with little radio play and minimal attention from MTV. Alive was released as the first single in July 1991, before the album even dropped. It received some play on alternative rock stations, but mainstream success remained elusive. Pearl Jam's strategy was simple: tour relentlessly and let people discover the music through live performances. The band played small clubs across America, building a reputation for incendiary live shows where Vedder would climb the rafters, dive into crowds, and pour every ounce of emotion into performances. Manager Kelly Curtis recalled, "Once people came and saw them live, this light bulb would go on. During their first tour, you kind of knew it was happening and there was no stopping it." In fall 1991, the band opened for the Red Hot Chili Peppers on their Blood Sugar Sex Magic tour, a spot arranged by Jack Irons as a favor to Eddie Vedder. Nirvana and the Smashing Pumpkins were also on the bill. By early 1992, something was shifting. Word of mouth was spreading. Alive was climbing rock radio charts. MTV started giving the video more airplay. Then came Jeremy. In July 1991, Eddie Vedder met photographer Chris Cufaro. Vedder suggested Cufaro film a music video for the band. Epic gave Cufaro permission to use any song from 10. He chose Jeremy, even though it wasn't intended to be a single at the time. Epic refused to fund the video, so Cufaro financed it himself by taking out a loan and selling all his furniture and half his guitar collection. He spent a day filming a young actor named Trevor Wilson playing Jeremy, then shot performance footage of the band on a revolving platform in a Los Angeles warehouse. By the time Cufaro finished his video, Epic had warmed to the idea of releasing Jeremy as a single. They brought in director Mark Pellington to create a new, bigger-budget version. Pellington wasn't initially a Pearl Jam fan, but the lyrics intrigued him. He spoke with Vedder, who shared his interpretation of Jeremy Dell's story. Pellington took notes on index cards, then went home to write a treatment on his computer. The computer crashed. Forced to rewrite from memory, what emerged was more stream of consciousness and a little more writing on emotion rather than logic, Pellington later recalled. At the time, Pellington's father was suffering from Alzheimer's, dredging up feelings of alienation and loneliness and child abandonment, and all those really primal feelings that speak to kids. Working with editor Bruce Ashley, Pellington created a collage of rapid-fire editing, stock imagery, graphics, text elements, and performance footage. The classroom scenes were filmed at Bayonne High School in New Jersey, with 12-year-old Trevor Wilson portraying Jeremy in his only acting role. The video focused heavily on Eddie Vedder, with the other band members shown only briefly. Some bandmates weren't thrilled with Pellington's movie-style approach, but it was undeniably powerful. The original ending showed Jeremy putting the gun in his mouth. MTV ordered it removed, citing their policy against showing firearms. The edited version was ambiguous. We see Jeremy walk shirtless into the classroom, throw an apple to his teacher, make a gesture as if pulling something from his pocket, then cut to his classmates shocked and covered in blood. The video premiered on August 1, 1992, and MTV put it into heavy rotation. The impact was immediate and massive. Jeremy helped transform 10 from a slow seller into a phenomenon. By late 1992, the album had broken into the Billboard 200's top 10. Eventually, it peaked at number 2, held off the top spot only by Billy Ray Cyrus's Some Gave All. At the 1993 MTV Video Music Awards on September 2nd, Jeremy won 4 Moonmen: Video of the Year, Best Group Video, Best Metal Hard Rock Video, and Best Direction. When Pearl Jam accepted Video of the Year, Trevor Wilson joined them on stage. Vedder introduced him to the crowd. "This is Trevor. He lives. In his acceptance speech, Vedder was ambivalent about the competitive nature of awards. I don't know how you can say it's the best. It's just a little piece of art, and you can't put art into a competition. He did acknowledge the power of music in his own life. If it weren't for music, I think I would have shot myself in the front of the classroom. It really is what kept me alive, so this is kind of full circle. So to the power of music, thanks. The video's success catapulted Pearl Jam into the stratosphere. But it also brought controversy. Jeremy Dell's family and classmates were blindsided by the song and video's popularity. Jeremy's mother, Wanda Crane, later spoke publicly about her son for the first time in 2018. That day that he died did not define his life, she told a local news station. He was a son, a brother, a nephew, a cousin, a grandson. He was a friend. He was talented. She revealed that Jeremy had been a prize-winning artist, having won first place at the Texas State Fair. His bedroom walls were covered with his artwork. Brittany King, a classmate who was in Jeremy's English class that day, was angry about the song. I was angry at them for writing that song, she said. I thought, you don't know. You weren't there. That story isn't accurate. The song and video took the tragedy of Jeremy Wade Dell's death and turned it into a cultural phenomenon. For the Dell family, every time they heard the song on the radio or saw the video on MTV, they were reminded of their loss. Pearl Jam never contacted Jeremy's family before releasing the song. The band later acknowledged the delicate nature of the subject matter, but the song remained one of their biggest hits. Vedder himself tried to contextualize it in a 1993 interview. It came from a small paragraph in a paper which means you kill yourself and you make a big old sacrifice and try to get your revenge. That all you're gonna end up with is a paragraph in a newspaper, 64 degrees and cloudy in a suburban neighborhood. That's the beginning of the video, and that's the same thing in the end. It does nothing. Nothing changes. The world goes on and you're gone. The song, for better or worse, would foreshadow the epidemic of school violence that would plague America in the decades to come. Columbine, Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, Parkland, and countless others would make Jeremy Dell's 1991 suicide tragically prescient. By February 1993, 10 had achieved something remarkable. It had outsold Nirvana's Nevermind in the United States. While Nirvana's breakthrough was explosive and immediate, Pearl Jam's ascent was slower but ultimately more sustained. 10 spent 264 weeks on the Billboard 200, making it one of the top 15 longest charting albums in history. In 1993, 2 years after its release, 10 was the 8th best-selling album in the United States, outselling even Pearl Jam's own second album, Voices, which had debuted at number 1 earlier that year. At the 1993 Grammy Awards, Jeremy received nominations for Best Rock Song and Best Hard Rock Performance, though the band didn't win either category. The commercial success was staggering. By February 2013, 10 had sold 13 million copies in the United States, earning 13x platinum certification from the RIAA. Worldwide sales exceeded 18 million copies. But Pearl Jam's relationship with fame was complicated from the start. The band refused to make Black a single despite Epic Records' insistence. It was one of the album's most beautiful and emotionally resonant songs, and fans connected deeply with it. It reached number 3 on the mainstream rock chart, despite never being officially released as a single. Those fragile songs get crushed by the business, Vedder explained. I don't want to be a part of it. I don't think the band wants to be part of it. After the massive success of the Jeremy video, Pearl Jam stopped making music videos entirely for 5 years. They felt the medium was becoming more important than the music itself, and they wanted fans to experience their songs through live performances, not slickly produced visuals. This anti-commercial stance would soon put them on a collision course with one of the most powerful corporations in the music industry. By 1994, Pearl Jam was America's best-selling rock band. 10 had gone multi-platinum, and their second album, Voices, had set the record for most copies sold in a single week. They had the leverage to do something few bands ever attempted: challenge the music industry's infrastructure. The target was Ticketmaster, the ticketing giant that controlled approximately 63% of major concert venues in the United States through exclusive long-term contracts. Pearl Jam wanted to keep ticket prices affordable for their fans. For their planned 1994 summer tour, they asked venues to charge no more than $18 per ticket with a service fee of $1.80 or less, keeping the total under $20. Ticketmaster typically charged service fees 2 or 3 times that amount, with fees on premium tickets reaching as high as $18 alone. Venues around the country turned down Pearl Jam's proposal. They were locked into exclusive contracts with Ticketmaster and couldn't use alternative ticketing services without breaching those agreements. Pearl Jam canceled their entire 1994 summer tour. On May 6, 1994, Pearl Jam filed a complaint with the United States Department of Justice, alleging that Ticketmaster had a monopoly over ticket distribution and used that power to pressure promoters into boycotting the band. On June 30, 1994, Jeff Ament and Stone Gossard testified before Congress about Ticketmaster's practices. The media covered it as a novelty. Grunge rockers visit the Hill, without fully grasping the seriousness of the band's claims. Our band, which is determined to keep ticket prices low, will always be in conflict with Ticketmaster, Gossard stated during his testimony. Ticketmaster CEO Fred Rosen shot back, "If Pearl Jam wants to play for free, we'll be happy to distribute their tickets for free." In 1995, Pearl Jam attempted an alternative tour using a startup ticketing company called ETM Entertainment Network. They booked shows at fairgrounds, ski lodges, racetracks, and soccer fields, anywhere not affiliated with Ticketmaster. The tour was a logistical nightmare. Counterfeit tickets were rampant. Security issues arose at venues not accustomed to hosting concerts. Shows had to be cancelled. Eddie Vedder later described the frustration. "It was getting in the way of making music and playing live shows. When we tried to do the tour all on our own, we spent more time on where to put the portaloos than when it came to setlist." The Justice Department investigated Ticketmaster for over a year before dropping the case in July 1995. The conclusion, challenging Ticketmaster was too difficult and there wasn't enough evidence to prove antitrust violations. Pearl Jam had lost. By 1998, the band reluctantly began using Ticketmaster venues again. They had no choice if they wanted to tour properly. "In some ways, it robbed us of some of our idealism," Vedder admitted years later. The Ticketmaster battle had cost Pearl Jam an estimated $2 million in lost revenue and severely limited their ability to tour during the mid-1990s, arguably the peak of their popularity. But while they lost the legal battle, they had exposed Ticketmaster's practices to public scrutiny for the first time. The fight would be remembered decades later when artists like Taylor Swift faced similar controversies with the ticketing giant. 10 didn't just launch Pearl Jam's career, it helped define a generation's relationship with rock music. The album arrived at a perfect cultural moment. In 1991, hair metal was dying. Pop music felt manufactured. MTV dominated youth culture. Alternative rock was bubbling up from the underground, ready to explode. Nevermind by Nirvana broke through first, opening the floodgates. But 10 provided something different. Where Nirvana offered rage and alienation, Pearl Jam offered catharsis and connection. Vedder's baritone voice felt like a friend sitting next to you, telling you it was okay to feel everything so deeply. The album's influence is measurable in concrete ways. It spent over 5 years on the Billboard 200. It produced 3 top 10 mainstream rock hits. It won Video of the Year at the MTV VMAs. It's been certified 13x platinum. But the real impact is harder to quantify. Chris Cornell, who had been Andrew Wood's best friend and roommate, reflected on Pearl Jam's success. "It's great to see them achieve what Andy wanted to achieve. In a way, Andy's dream came true through them." The album's themes, alienation, mental health struggles, homelessness, identity, grief, resonated with millions of listeners who felt disconnected from mainstream culture. Songs like Black and Alive became anthems for people processing their own trauma. Alive, which Eddie Vedder wrote about the painful revelation of his true paternity, took on a different meaning for fans. At concerts, audiences would sing it as a celebration of survival. Vedder initially resisted this interpretation but eventually embraced it. "At first I was angry that people didn't understand what the song was about," Vedder said. "But I realized that once you release a song, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to whoever needs it." The album also changed the music industry's perception of what a debut could be. Major labels began scouring Seattle and other cities for the next Pearl Jam, signing countless grunge and alternative bands in the early 90s. Some succeeded, most didn't. Pearl Jam themselves would evolve dramatically over their career. They experimented with different sounds, wrote more experimental songs, and deliberately avoided repeating the formula of 10. Their second album, V's, was rawer and angrier. Their third, Vitalogy, was even more confrontational. They refused to rest on the commercial formula that 10 had established. "We could have made 10 Part 2 and probably sold just as many records," Jeff Ament said. "But that's not why we make music." In 2009, Pearl Jam released a remixed version of 10 by producer Brendan O'Brien, removing some of the reverb and arena rock production polish from Rick Parashar's original mix. The band felt the 2009 version better represented how they had intended the songs to sound: rawer, more immediate, less processed. Fans were divided. Some preferred the clarity and punch of the remix. Others felt the original production was essential to the album's character, that the reverb and polish were what made 10 sound epic rather than just another indie rock record. Both versions have merit. Both tell the story of 5 musicians trying to make sense of grief, identity, and the world around them. The 5 musicians who recorded 10 all took different paths after the album's success. Dave Cruzan, the drummer who played on the entire album, completed rehabilitation and continued his music career. He played with Candlebox for several years and formed the band Unified Theory. In interviews, he speaks fondly of his time with Pearl Jam, despite how it ended. "I have no regrets," he said in a 2011 interview. "I was part of something special, and I'm proud of that." Mike McCready remained with Pearl Jam through every album and tour. He also formed side projects like Mad Season with Alice in Chains' Lane Staley and helped found the Seattle alternative rock station KMTT. McCready has been open about his struggles with Crohn's disease and addiction, using his platform to raise awareness about both issues. Jeff Ament stayed with Pearl Jam while also playing in side projects like Three Fish and RNDM. He continued his work as a visual artist, designing album covers and tour posters. Ament also became heavily involved in building skate parks in Montana communities, funding over a dozen projects. Stone Gossard remained Pearl Jam's rhythm guitarist while also founding Loose Groove Records and playing in side bands Brad and Painted Shield. He became interested in technology and invested in various startups. Like Ament, Gossard balanced his role in one of rock's biggest bands with pursuing creative interests outside the spotlight. Eddie Vedder became the face of Pearl Jam, though he has consistently resisted the role of rockstar frontman. He married model Jill McCormick in 2010 and has 2 daughters. Vedder released solo albums, composed the soundtrack for the film Into the Wild, and became a passionate advocate for environmental causes and reproductive rights. His voice, that distinctive baritone that made 10 so emotionally powerful, has remained remarkably consistent over 3 decades. Pearl Jam as a band has endured when most of their 90s contemporaries fractured or disappeared. They've released 11 studio albums. They've been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They've remained independent and uncompromising, turning down lucrative reunion tours and nostalgia cash grabs. They still perform songs from 10 at nearly every concert, and audiences still sing every word. The story of 10 cannot be separated from the death of Andrew Wood. Without Wood's overdose, Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament might never have formed a new band. Without their grief driving them to create new music, there would have been no instrumental demos. Without those demos, Eddie Vedder would never have written Alive, Once, and Black. Chris Cornell's Temple of the Dog project, created explicitly to honor Wood, directly led to Pearl Jam's formation. Those sessions brought Vedder into the Seattle scene and gave him his first experience recording with Gossard, Ament, and McCready. Say Hello to Heaven, one of Temple of the Dog's most powerful songs, was Cornell's tribute to his fallen friend. The lyrics captured the Seattle scene's collective grief. Please, Mother Mercy, take me from this place, and the long-winded curses I hear in my head. Words never listen, and teachers never learn. Now I'm warm from the candle, though I feel too cold to burn. Andrew Wood never achieved the fame he dreamed about, but his death inadvertently created the conditions for one of rock's most important albums. Wanda Crane, Jeremy Dell's mother, said something in her 2018 interview that applies equally to Wood. That one day does not define who he was. Both young men, Wood and Dell, became symbols embedded in the story of 10. Their deaths gave the album weight and meaning beyond just the music, but they were also real people. Wood was a brother, a son, a boyfriend, a bandmate. Dell was an artist, a student, a kid passing notes in detention. The album's power comes partly from how it transforms personal tragedy into universal emotion. Millions of people who never knew Andrew Wood or Jeremy Dell have found solace in songs born from their stories. That's the uncomfortable truth about art. Sometimes beauty emerges from catastrophe. Sometimes the greatest works come from the deepest pain. 10 sold 13 million copies in the United States. It made Pearl Jam wealthy and famous beyond their wildest expectations. But success came with a price none of them anticipated. The intense media scrutiny, particularly around Eddie Vedder, became suffocating. Magazines wanted to position him as the voice of a generation. MTV wanted him to be a rock star. Fans wanted him to save them. Vedder retreated from the spotlight, giving fewer interviews and avoiding photo shoots. The rest of the band followed his lead, creating a unified front against the celebrity industrial complex. We didn't get into this to be famous, Stone Gossard said. We got into this to play music. The Ticketmaster battle consumed years of their career and millions of dollars. While they fought for their principles, They missed the opportunity to tour during their commercial peak. By the time they returned to regular touring in the late 90s, alternative rock's cultural moment had passed. Dave Abruzzese, who replaced Cruisin' and played drums during Pearl Jam's explosive 1992-1994 period, was fired from the band in 1994. The exact reasons remain disputed, but tensions over his desire for more recognition and conflicts with Vedder appear to have been factors. Abruzzese later sued the band, claiming he deserved a share of royalties for his contributions to their live performances and albums. Jack Irons, the former Red Hot Chili Peppers drummer who had introduced Vedder to the band, replaced Abruzzese, but Irons left in 1998 due to the toll of extensive touring. Matt Cameron of Soundgarden became Pearl Jam's permanent drummer in 1998, providing the stability the position had lacked for years. The band's refusal to play the industry game, no videos, limited press, fighting Ticketmaster, keeping ticket prices low, meant they left enormous amounts of money on the table, but they kept their integrity intact. "We could have made a lot more money if we'd been willing to compromise," Jeff Ament acknowledged, "but then we wouldn't be Pearl Jam anymore. We'd be something else." On a March afternoon in 1990, a young man died in a Seattle hospital room while Queen played in the background. 18 months later, 5 musicians released a debut album recorded on a modest budget in a Seattle studio. That album, 10, went on to sell over 13 million copies in the United States alone. It won Video of the Year at the MTV VMAs. It spent 5 years on the Billboard charts. It influenced countless bands and defined the sound of early 90s rock. But the real story of 10 isn't about sales figures or awards. It's about how grief becomes music. How a surfer from San Diego wrote lyrics while still dripping wet from the ocean. How a teenager's suicide became an MTV phenomenon. How 5 musicians fought Ticketmaster and lost, but exposed corporate greed in the process. It's about the uncomfortable truth that great art often emerges from tragedy. That Andrew Wood's death and Jeremy Dell's suicide became part of rock history because Eddie Vedder transformed pain into poetry. It's about the cost of success. The drummer who lost his spot due to alcoholism. The battles over credit and royalties. The years spent fighting a ticketing monopoly instead of making music. It's about a band that could have made 10 Part 2 and dominated the 90s, but chose integrity over commercial success. That refused to make videos when videos would have made them richer. That kept ticket prices low when they could have maximized profits. 10 is one of the best-selling rock albums of all time. It's also one of the most principled. Both things can be true. Pearl Jam never made another album like 10. They evolved, experimented, and sometimes alienated fans with their artistic choices, but they stayed together when most of their contemporaries broke up. They stayed independent when others sold out. They stayed true to the spirit that created that debut album in 1991. Rick Parashar, who produced 10 at London Bridge Studios, passed away in 2014 at age 50. His brother Raj issued a statement. "Rick was a hugely talented individual and a dear friend to many. His contributions to music were immeasurable." Dave Cruisin, speaking in 2020, reflected on his brief time with the band. "I look back on it with gratitude. We made something special. We captured lightning in a bottle. And even though I wasn't there for the success, I was there when it mattered, when we were making the music." Eddie Vedder, in a rare reflective moment during a 2022 concert, introduced Alive with these words. "This is a song about finding out the truth and being lied to. It's a song about pain. But somewhere along the way, you all turned it into something else. You turned it into survival. You turned it into hope. Thank you for that." The audience sang every word, hands in the air, voices rising together. That's the magic of 10. It transforms individual pain into collective catharsis. It takes tragedy and makes it transcendent. Andrew Wood died before he could achieve his dream of rock stardom. But his death set in motion a series of events that created one of rock's most important albums. Jeremy Wade Dell died in front of his classmates in a moment of desperation. But Eddie Vedder transformed that tragedy into a song that made millions of people feel less alone. 10 is an album about death, grief, identity, alienation, and survival. It's an album that almost wasn't released on vinyl. That was rejected by its label as uncommercial. That took a year to find its audience. And it's an album that 33 years later still sounds urgent, honest, and alive. This has been the Sound Vault. Every album has a story. And some stories, like Pearl Jam's, remind us that from the darkest moments can come the most powerful art.